Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. In this episode we'll make some rye bread. While making rye bread may sound quite daunting, in fact it is the easiest bread to make of all. You just weigh your ingredients, you mix them and you wait. There's no kneading the dough, there's no stretching, no folding, no dividing if you're making only one. Super simple. And while being the easiest bread to make, the end result is one of the best you could get. And a complete beginner could get this right from the first try. So keep watching if you want to see how it's made. And as always, you'll find a full recipe with all the details down in the description box. But first, let's see what equipment we need. We'll start with the usual suspects: bowl, scales, a dough scraper, temperature probe, and the last item we need is a loaf tin. Now on to the ingredients. We'll need some rye flour, some water, some mixed seeds. I'm using linseeds and sunflower seeds and caraway. And then we'll need some yeast, some salt, and some black treacle, or any dark sugar syrup would work perfectly. Now the first thing we need to do is make a pre-ferment. A pre-ferment is a portion of the total flour that's been fermented ahead of time. It will give us better flavor, better texture, and digestibility. My kitchen's quite warm, so I'm using water that's 23 degrees Celsius. But if you want to learn more about dough temperature, click the link in top right corner. So to make a pre-ferment, add your water to a bowl, add a tiny pinch of yeast, and then add the flour, and give it a good mix. And that's it. That's the whole process of making a pre-ferment. This super simple process would transform any bread and bump it up to the next level. So as I said before, I'm using water that is cooler than room temperature. And then I know that my pre-ferment will take around 10 hours to be ready. But don't worry if it over-ferments, that's not a big deal. As long as it's doubled in size, you're good to go. I normally leave this overnight, and then the next day I can make the bread. You see it's full of bubbles. Again, my kitchen's super hot right now, so I'm using cold water, around 20 degrees Celsius. So to make the final dough, we have our pre-ferment, then get the rest of the water, add the rest of the yeast, add the treacle, or your syrup of your choice, add the salt, then give it a good mix. Then add the seeds to the pre-ferment, and then add the liquid, and mix it all together. The only ingredient missing now is the rest of the flour. So once everything's nicely mixed, add that, and then mix again. And be patient, mix it thoroughly. This stuff is super sticky. You could build a brick wall with it. Once everything's mixed, take it off the sides of the bowl, kind of collect it into the middle. Then grab a bit of flour and sprinkle it all over. Unlike most breads, where you have to knead the dough after mixing, we are skipping straight to the final shaping stage. So dust your work surface generously. You don't want this to stick. Don't worry about having too much flour on there because you'll shake it off later on. Now grab your scraper, release the dough from the bowl and tip it out on the floured surface. Now using your hands, shape it into a loaf. Roll it around, pat it out. If it starts sticking to your hands, flour your hands again. Try not to fold it over, because you don't want to fold any raw flour into the dough. All you need to do is make sure it's covered from the outside. And that's your loaf. Now just get the flour away, clean up the mess, get your loaf tin, place your dough right in there. Make sure to press it down so it fills all the gaps. We want it tidy and looking nice. So just use your hand, press it down, get it in all the corners. Then clean down the sides and sprinkle a little bit more flour on top if need be. You'll see later on the flour will provide a really nice effect on the final dough. So dust your flour all over in a light coat, and then there's one more thing we need to do to make this look really nice. At the moment the edges of the dough are really untidy, so what you can do is grab your scraper and kind of press it in at a 45-degree angle. Create a nice edge around the loaf and release a little bit from the sides of the tin. Now we can already see it taking shape. This is going to be a nice loaf of bread. And by the way, I'm using a ½ kilo loaf tin, which is a bit over a pound in imperial units. So once it's all shaped up and looking nice, cover it up and we can leave it to proof. But before that, always take the temperature. 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this loaf. and it should take around 2 hours to be fully fermented. The dough should rise over the tin and should have cracks all over it. You will clearly see when it's ready. Make sure the oven is preheated before baking, 160 degrees C with a fan on. And if you have a cast iron skillet or solid thick tray, place in the oven as well to preheat. This will help with baking. But don't get me wrong, you'll work without it as well. So before placing the loaf in the oven, what I like to do is just tidy up the edges again. You'll just keep them nice and even. And that's the final step before baking. Now get it in the oven. It should not take more than 15 minutes or so. A rye loaf will not puff up as much as a wheat loaf. Most of its volume would have been gained before baking. And if you are ever unsure about its doneness, stick a temperature probe in it. If it reads more than 94 degrees Celsius in the thickest part, then it's done. And that's the rye bread. Simple, right? And all we had to do is mix some ingredients, place them in a loaf tin and bake them. If you still have any questions or suggestions, drop them down in comments. And check out my other videos for breads made with pre-ferments, sourdough breads. I also have another rye bread video, which I made ages ago. That was my second video ever. And consider subscribing if you haven't already. I make new bread videos every Wednesday and Sunday and got loads more interesting stuff to come. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.